around 75% of the workforce got laid off, and I was sadly part of that.
Describe the most challenging partner that you had to deal with over the past few years.
Customers were starting to complain, saying that they are getting spammed by certain people on their phones directly. Some spammers were able to get hold of their phone numbers, and they were like trying to either text them or call them directly on their phones.
How do you try to negotiate or influence this product manager?
And I said, yeah, you could do it, but it is going to cause issues. Like the genuine buyers are going to get, blocked over there, right?
Did it solve the spammer issue?
The customer service said that, the number of complaints has gone down by almost 90% in the very first week itself.
I have a couple suggestions to add to your introduction. Hi, Anurag. How are you? Just to briefly introduce myself, my name is Senat Chimic. Last 4 years, I spent coaching mainly EMs for helping them secure jobs at tier 1 companies or also up-leveling at the current companies. Most of my career I spent at Amazon, where I spent in total a little bit over 12 and a half years. Second half of that, I managed global engineering teams and managers across US and India. Also served as a bar raiser. I don't know if you're familiar with the bar raiser program at Amazon. Anyway, okay, cool. So I did a little bit of 350 interview, over 350 interviews there. In between my Amazon roles, I also worked at Snap or Snapchat, which is social media company, as one of their engineering managers. And I started my career a while back in Midwest at a company called Thomson Reuters as a software engineer. So that's a super brief about myself. If you don't mind, I plan on covering your introduction as part of the mock interview. So that way I can give you feedback on the intro as well. Does that work?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. And before we get started, I just wanted to check for this session, what are you looking to get out of? What would be the most value? Are you looking for like a standard mock interview? And I noticed that you're looking to, it's like this Amazon behavioral interview. So, we can do something like that. Or are you looking for more of a kind of general coaching or guidance type of session?
So a bit of both, actually. Maybe we can have an actual, mock interview initially, and then towards the end, if you have any feedbacks, or I have a few questions, obviously, and I can maybe get those clarified from you.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. That sounds great. That sounds great. The other thing I want to clarify, do you know do you have a specific role that you're targeting to interview for at Amazon, or is this kind of general prep for Amazon?
Yeah, so I'm trying to target the Amazon ads teams that are present here in Toronto, Canada. And so this is for any of those teams which are trying to hire for L5 levels.
Okay. For L5 SD.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Okay. Sounds great. Cool. Yeah, that helps. Yeah, thanks. Let's go ahead and get started, and let's start with introduction. So could you tell me a little bit about yourself, and as part of that, also talk a little bit about your most recent role and responsibilities?
Absolutely. Hey, so I'm Anurag. I was working with Kijiji until the June of this year. That's where, around 75% of the workforce got laid off, and I was sadly part of that. I was working with Kijiji from the November of 2022 until this year, June. As part of my role there, I was responsible for several aspects of the website. So one of my notable contributions, was to adding the car, like, the price ratings onto the autos vehicles. So we had autos listings on the site, and we had to basically put a grade on the listing price, if it is good, bad, or maybe an excellent deal. So I was part of that team. Prior to that, I was working with a fintech company called Vitech Systems, which is based off in New York City. As part of that stint, I was working on their billing team, which was responsible to generate, the invoices for all of the insurance clients, who were buying insurance claims from our clients instead. Prior to that, I was pursuing my master's in ISM from Carnegie Mellon. That was from 2018 till 2019. That's about me.
Okay. Okay, sounds great. Cool. Thank you. Could you take one of the, or briefly describe one of the main systems that you worked on or that you owned at your most recent role? And let's describe it on a very high level in technical terms. Like, what does the architecture look like overall? How did it fit into bigger picture? What tech stack did you use, and so on?
Sure. So as part of the like very recently, that was from January till March of this year, and I was part of the autos team, which was basically responsible for all of the trucks and cars listings that were advertised on Kijiji's site. So Kijiji is basically a re-commerce site, that is the second hand, like selling and buying, of the second-hand goods. So any cars that get listed on Gage's site. So we also wanted to, give our buyers a perspective as to whether this particular price on this particular car is, a good deal, or is it, a bad deal. So we partnered up with another third party called Carfax, which has all of the, the like price history, and they also provided us with a fair pricing based on, the car's year, make, model, location, right, based on all of those parameters. And so based on that, we use a formula. If the price on the listing is within a particular range, we used to assign it one particular rating. And for this, we used Java as the main language, and we were using HTTP5 clients to make calls to Carfax. There were also rate limiters, etc., that were implemented, and the entire, KG's platform is on GCP. So that's where the service was hosted.
Okay, great. Thanks. And this service, it was it running on, you mentioned it was hosted on a GCP. So assuming it was running on the actual host in the cloud?
Yeah.
Or was it more like a serverless architecture type of thing?
Right. So on GCP's, like the Cloud Run, which is basically a serverless architecture, and as in the GCP cloud is provided to us as a service by Google. So our services were hosted on Google's cloud. So yeah, I mean there were serverless architecture, as you mentioned.
Okay, great. Could you, one final follow-up question on this one. Could you describe some of the main operational KPIs or key performance indicators for this particular system? Or other words, what were some of the metrics that you and the team looked at to make sure that overall system is healthy?
Yeah, sure. So, we had our alerting systems set up on Grafana. So we were trying to ingest the logs from the service, and also, we were relying on the metrics that were being like spewed out by GCP itself. And we had set up alerts, that it should alert us if the error rate, goes beyond a certain percentage. It was set to 0.02%. And if the error rate, goes beyond that, then, it should send an alert to the on-call team. Yeah, so and we were trying to monitor that, and every time there was any such alert, we used to go back and look into, why this alert was, had gotten triggered. So in order to keep things down, in, at least in the initial phase, we only rolled it out batch wise, like to, let's say, initially only to 10% of traffic, and then when things went fine, we then roll it up. So we then increase the traffic percentage to 25, and then 50, and then eventually to, the complete 100%.
Okay, great. Thanks. And as you were releasing incrementally or gradually, was error rate the main thing that you were looking at?
The error rate and also the latency, on the requests. The latency. So Carfax API was a slow API. It used to take almost 200 milliseconds, to just like load even a single result. So to get over this fact, what we did is we started to, to basically cache the prices on our site. So we used Firestore to cache the price ratings that we were getting from Carfax for every listing, with a TTL of 30 days, because, that's how far those prices were valid anyway, because after 30 days, the price rating might change. And also, like, the lifetime of any listing on Cage's platform is a max of 60 days. So after, like, one particular refresh, the second one, was not even needed unless the user reposts the ad,
Okay.
of course.
Okay, great. Thanks. And what was the name of the exact website?
It's called kijiji.ca. So it's .ca.
Okay. Okay, cool. All right. Sounds great. Thank you. Cool. All right. Let's move to the next question. For this one, could you describe the most challenging partner that you had to deal with over the past few years? And it can be either technical or not technical partner. And here I'm looking for some sort of a situation where you needed to resolve some sort of conflict or there was some sort of disagreement on some significant decision. And then let's talk about, okay, what was the situation and then how did you approach it?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. So the situation was that, our customers were starting to complain, saying that, they are getting spammed by certain people on their phones directly. Like, so as in, some spammers were able to get hold of their phone numbers, and they were like trying to either text them or call them directly on their phones. So this complaint arrived at our customer service team, who then told us the same thing to our product team, and then the product team created the ticket for the backend, like for the devs to basically check. So the task was, to find out how they were being spammed, and how were the spammers getting a hold of their phone numbers from our sites. So the action which I took was I went onto a few of those complainants user IDs, because that's all we had. We had to identify a few of them, even though it was production data, obviously. But since the complaints had come from them, so we all had to take a look at few of those profiles. And the only source that I could see was their listings had their phone numbers attached to them, so that the buyers can then contact them directly and get a deal done much faster. What the spammers were doing is they were using bots to basically reveal these phone numbers. So what our site was doing is it had the first three digits in plain text, but then the last seven digits were obfuscated. But if you click on it, the entire phone number would just simply show up. So the product team then told me that let's implement a reblaze leveled like rate limiting onto the onto this particular endpoint. I said we should not do it, because the so how reblaze works is it basically puts a rate limit based on the IP addresses of the clients. Now the issue is the IP address which we see are usually the public IP addresses, and it could be, let's say, from a single household. Let's say if five people are trying to access our site, all five's IP address is going to be the exact same. So let's say even if we put a rate limit of say 5 per minute or so, it's going to cause issues. The product team, I mean, she was a product manager, so she obviously could override me, and then she said that no, I know I want to put this as as a immediate stop gate, kind of a thing. I said, yeah, you could do it, but it is going to cause issues. Like the genuine buyers are going to get blocked over there, right? As she did not she still went ahead and she put the rate limit anyway by working with our infra team lead. And after 4 hours, then so there were complaints that the customer service again got, saying that, hey, the genuine buyers are in fact getting blocked, which is what I had basically warned her about. So immediately that was then taken down. In the same, let's say the meeting was, I think, between 10:30 to 11 a.m. in the morning. So I had told her that, look, as an alternate to your solution, we could implement a recapture based solution, in which if the user is an actual valid user and not a bot, then they would be allowed to see the phone number, and if not, then they would be blocked, right? So anyway, so around evening she had to roll back the changes that she had made. Then I was given around 3 to 4 or 5 days time to implement the reblaze based solution on the capture based solution on the backend. And after that was implemented, obviously we initially only rolled it out to like 10% of the traffic. So as a result of that, initially within the very first week, when we were at 25% traffic, after checking for like a couple of days, the customer service said that the number of complaints has gone down by almost 90% in the very first week itself. And those were like so they were not getting any more genuine complaints at all, right? And then the second week, when we further increased the traffic from 50% to 100%, then they said that, hey, the complaints have almost completely gone away. It's so they said that 95% of the complaints are now gone, and only 5% users are still complaining, saying that they are getting spammed. But that's because like if somebody manually goes and then tries to see the phone number, that's still going to work, right? So
Yeah, great. So the capture solution, it allowed, it reduced the need for limiting by volume, so everybody could exit, humans could complete the capture and so on, right? And did you say, did it solve the spammer issue?
yes, of course. That's what I was saying, right? So, like, the 95% of the complaints about, the spamming
See.
was away. Like, those were, out. Only 5% of complaints were still there. But that was, because, let's say if a spammer, still tries to, like they themselves go and they try to see your phone number, they can still do that because capture is going to let them do it. And you know what? It was reCAPTCHA version 3. So there was really, like no challenge. Google, was doing it on the backend on its own.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Apurva Misra, and if you're wondering whether you're getting paid what you deserve, stop guessing. I am linking a salary analyzer which will show you exactly where you stand in today's market. It also breaks down the skills that you need to reach the next salary band, also gives you a personalized roadmap. Just drop your resume into the tool, and by the time this video gets over, you would know where you currently stand and how you're going to get to your full potential.
How did you try to negotiate or influence this product manager during the initial discussion, right? Because here it sounds like even after you raised concern, she went ahead and did it anyway, right? So just curious, how did that initial discussion go, and why do you think she still went ahead and introduced the rate limiting?
Yeah, the initial conversation was, see, you have to deny, but you have to deny it in a professional way. I cannot, be harsh or anything on her. So yeah, obviously, I tried explaining her, saying that, look, this is what would ideally happen. Your ideal buyers are going to get blocked, but I think she was under pressure, from her senior up. So, that's why because they were, I think, like pressurizing her, saying that we might lose actual sellers from our site, and that would be a hit, on the earnings. So she went ahead, and she had to implement a solution, right away to show the results. So I think she still went away. She still, went ahead and implemented the IP-based
Got it.
solution. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, great. Thanks. And then at what point did you introduce CAPTCHA solution in the conversation?
It was initially, at the like in the very first the meeting where we were, discussing this issue, and then she said that she wants to implement this IP-based rate limiting. I said, let's not do that, and instead we can do this. I can think of this particular solution, so let's try this one out first. But yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Last follow-up question. What were some of the learnings out of this whole experience on either side, either your or the PM side? Meaning, what are some of the things that the team, whether it's engineering team or product team, started doing differently for similar kind of situations going forward?
Absolutely. Yeah. So based on this experience of mine, so we used to have a backend sync up every Monday. So I also presented this particular solution of mine on the next weekday, the next week's Monday. And then for another of a similar situation, where the users are complaining about, not the users, but the dealers were complaining about certain listings. So that's where, we also implemented the same reCAPTCHA based solution, but that was implemented by another dev based on the like Confluent document that I had created earlier based on my own experience. So we knew that, instead of blindly implementing IP-based, rate limiting, we could instead do this.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next question. Would you tell me about the largest project that you delivered, either at the previous company or before, or what is the largest project that you led and delivered, or what is a project that you're most proud of?
The one that I'm most proud of is GCP log correlation project. Has to pay it. So the situation was that, when I joined Key back in 2022, we were still using physical servers and only 5% of our traffic was on GCP. And then eventually through 2023, we moved on completely to GCP, right? And then in 2024, around that, we were facing 2024 March was this one, then 2024 May and June month. So every new service that we were trying to create, so it was basically creating more and more log entries, right? So what was happening is, it was difficult to track any like one particular issue because let's say the request would ideally travel through multiple services, right? So it was difficult to keep track that exactly where the request has traveled, and like which service was the source of failure. So we were already discussing, about like GCP log tracing, but then so there was no one solution, and everybody was implementing it in their own particular way, right? Like every team was doing it in their own way. We needed a standardized approach. So like the task which was given to me was that, let's try and find one standardized way in which we can do like all of this work, right? So as an action point, because I had not dealt with GCP tracking until this point, so I went on to the GCP site, their documentation sites. I started looking at what a trace ID is, how a trace ID works, how we can implement this in one particular way. And then I proposed that we can come up with one, let's say, Maven dependency. Like it was one project which was implementing the GCP, I think it was called GCP Cloud Logging dependency. So what you had to do was you had to also configure it per project and per service, and then you had to like generate one UUID which would then act as a tracing ID for the entire flow of your request, right? So I implemented this in my GCP log correlation project, and I put it up, into our private Maven repo. And I told that basically, I again presented the same thing at the backend sync up. And I told that, look, this is the project which is there, and all you need to do is include this as a dependency onto your project and just add a few config lines, basically, the level of the log which you need, whether it would be error or info, right? All of those, and also followed by the format. Everybody invariably chose JSON format. And yeah, so then they didn't have to do anything else. All that they had to do was they had to add it to the startup script for the service, because we were using open telemetry, and just had to like tell it as a parameter to use this like the particular file from the dependency to basically like pass all of the requests through it. And what that dependency did is it would automatically extract the header of your request. It would see if there is already a trace ID. If not, it would generate one and include it. If it is there, it would basically include the same trace ID with all of the future requests as well. So what happened is, now after all of the teams started to like include this dependency onto the services, there was a standardized way in which the logs then started to come out. The trace IDs were getting appended to all of the log entries, and as a result, on the GCP log explorer, when you had to go and check for any of the issues, all you had to do was click on the tracing ID, and then say show me similar logs, and it would show you the the logs, like from the gateway level till the very last level. So everywhere this like the particular request went through, it would show you the entire chain and exactly where it failed. So as a result, the debugging time got significantly reduced, and also the time to come up with the, let's say, fresh microservices, even that came down, because earlier they had to include all of the files on their own, right? And now all they have to do was add this as a dependency, 2 lines of config, and that's it, done.
Okay, great. Thank you. Who did you need to influence when you came out with this solution? Meaning, once you start looking into it and once you identified, okay, this particular approach is what you're gonna use for your project and then showcase it to others, who did you need to influence and align along the way? And did anybody push back?
Right. So there was our head of platform. I'm not going to say his name, but our head of platform, he's the one, because the platform team is the one which basically takes care of all of these. They have to take care of the platform's performance, and all of these, right? So I had to pitch this idea to him first, and once he approved, saying, well, yes, go ahead, because anyway every team is currently trying to waste a few let's say few hours trying to set this up. Instead, if you have this, it's going to be fast enough. So yeah, go ahead. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, sounds great. Sorry, just keeping track of some of the feedback and notes. Cool.
Good.
What was the scope in terms of this project, right? So this was something that was adopted by your team, and then you mentioned other teams as well. Out of curiosity, how many do you have a rough ballpark? How many teams or how many engineers started following it?
Yeah, the entire company took it up. So it was not that big. So we were hardly, I think, 70 or 80 engineers in total. So all of the microservices then had to have this as a standard config. So yeah, it did take some time to get adapted, because all of the upcoming microservices, they obviously took this up because this was already there. But the existing ones, they had to basically migrate their existing logic to this. So they took maybe 1 month's time. But yeah, eventually all of the services started to use this as a dependency on their service.
Okay, great. Thank you. One last follow-up question on this one I had was, what was the project size in terms of overall engineering effort? Or we can talk both about calendar time and then engineering effort, meaning, if it was, say, 2 engineers working for 2 months, then it would be 4 months of engineering effort. So curious how big the project was.
Yeah, it was just me, because it wasn't that big of a thing. So we were using a drop wizard. So and we obviously had a way to come up with the bare backbone code. So all you have to do was then include this dependency from Google, and then add a configurable way of for doing things. So it took me about a week's time to come up with the entire project, and yeah, that was about it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
If you are liking this video, then you love what I have to say next. You can spend months learning agentic AI or cut that time into half with a structured program by Interview Kickstart, where you actually build and ship 2 AI agents into production with a mentor from Faang guiding you through every step. It's called Agentic AI Career Boost Program. And if you think it's just another generic course, spoiler alert, it's not. It's customizable depending on your domain. Engineers, you have a Python-based AI engineering path. If you're a PM or a manager, you take no-code, low-code use case path. And both paths could be paired with Faang interview prep for AI-driven roles. But the best way to learn more about this program is through the free webinar. Here you can get all the details about the program, ask your questions, and see if it's the right fit for you. And if it is, you'll be joining a company of 25,000 professionals who have already leveled up through Interview Kickstart. Many now at Faang, Anthropic, OpenAI, already crossing 300K plus. And here is what some of them say. I'll put the link to the free webinar in the description, as well as pin it in the comments so you don't miss it. See you all there.
Cool. So let's go in the same order, starting with the introduction. So in the introduction, yeah, you mentioned some good points. I like how you covered the history of it. The couple things, I have a couple suggestions to add to your introduction. So overall, your introduction, you still want to keep it up until about 2-3 minutes. So you want to keep it a bit short. And some of these suggestions I'm about to mention are optional, and if you do introduce them, then keep it short, right? One is that would help interviewer understand is just provide maybe short sentence about a company, what it does, and why, how. Two things, the company, right, what it does, and I think that you actually described in one of the questions after that. So just very brief description of a company. And then two is the criticality of your work or the charter of your team, right? Why was critical of a company? And that should be relatively easy, right? Because it's a small company, you own a bunch of stuff. So, in one or two sentences, you can briefly describe it. So it comes out very, very important and very critical. The other thing is talk a little bit about scope. So one thing to keep in mind, L5 SDE is at Amazon. Generally, the way teams look at from team structure, how average team at Amazon looks like is you're going to have on average, say about 10. I mean, it could be 8 to 12 on a single team, something like that. There's typically going to be 1 or 2 senior engineers or 6 SDEs, and the rest of them are going to be a mix of L4 and L5, right? So there's going to be some L4s, so probably these days, because hiring is a little bit slower, there's going to be probably a little bit more L5s, right? But anyhow, you want to, as part of that, there is expectation for L5s to mentor and delegate things, right? And especially strong performers, meaning L5s that are, soon going to become L6s. They're driving bigger projects. As part of that, they're taking complex and biggest tasks, breaking down and delegating to other engineers, right? So as part of that, you want to highlight if you did any of that on a high level, right? Not going into examples. So, because this is just introduction, but on a high level, talk about your scope. So for instance, if you can summarize it in one sentence, maybe, once you describe what your team is, why it's critical, maybe you can talk about team size if it's a big team. And then you can mention, in the team, I lead so and so, I'm an SME for so and so. And as part of that, I usually lead a group of X engineers on these kind of projects and mentor X engineers, things like that, right? Because at Amazon, there is, and a lot of other tier one companies, there is a philosophy that, okay, the person that you're hiring for, they should be better than 50% of employees that are already at the company, the same level, same role, right? So if you have those things that help separate you from the rest of the candidates and that demonstrates interviewer why, or how you're raising candidate, you definitely want to highlight it, right? So here, just summarize, one sentence about your scope and, if you're leading group of engineers and, handling most complex project, and so on. The other thing is if you drive any programs or processes outside of your role, then highlight it, right? So you can, again, this is introduction, not going to have time going into details, but you can add one sentence and then offer to elaborate a little bit more about it. So for example, maybe you might be driving best operational practices across the company, or, like one of the examples that I mentioned, better logging and so on, right? So maybe if you have a story around where you kind of consistently tend to drive those kind of efficiency projects, then great. And if you're SME, maybe for something like that, where to the point where folks outside of your team consult you and you lead it kind of from the program perspective, then great. Highlight that. That sounds good. That sounds impressive, and it can help interviewer understand how you're able to stretch yourself and scale yourself, beyond just responsibilities that are assigned to you.
Yes.
The other thing, and this is more of a nitpick, you mentioned I was responsible for several aspects of the website. That's fine, but it's some interviews my understanding like, okay, you're more of a front-end engineer, right? So just highlight, small fixes there, you and your team, you own the full stack, right? And as part of that, you're responsible for the full stack of some of the key features on the website, but this included, the backend and everything.
I see. Okay, got it.
Any clarification questions on this one so far?
No, I think I have the points which you're talking about, so I'm going to change it. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks. The next question was describe one of the main tech systems that you're working with. It was good overall. One We didn't spend much time, so there could be additional follow-up questions. One thing to note is there might be additional follow-up questions around design decisions, right? So, for example, we talked about caching, so that'll be a good follow-up question. Okay, what kind of caching? You talked a little bit about eviction policy and so on. Great, right? But there could be other questions around the APIs or the data store, like what kind of information you store, how you store it, how you make sure the data is handled correctly, and so on. But overall, it was good. I liked it. The other feedback I had was when talking about operational KPIs, you mentioned error rates, which is, one main one that I expected to hear. Only later on, you mentioned latency. And yeah, that's another one, key one. Another key one that you did not mention is availability, like a site or feature availability. But then also you can talk about other things like maybe, ticket rates or, other things like that you might be monitoring.
Availability, yep.
Any clarification questions on this one?
Not really.
Okay, cool. Next one we talked about was the conflict. So let's see. I like that you picked example with somebody higher level than you, because I'm assuming this product manager was higher level. So that's great, because it's always more impressive to talk about conflict that you had with somebody higher level, because harder to influence them versus say somebody more junior, right? So that's good. Judgment was also good, right? The answer overall was a little bit lengthy. I felt that the specific situation part was a little bit lengthy, although I appreciated all the context and all that. But this is more a nitpick. It's not issue in most cases. It wouldn't be issue. But you might get, pick interest that might, cut you, especially if they have, very aggressive timeline in terms of the interview that you need to cover and data points you need to collect, right? So I would just shorten and make the situation part a little bit more concise, but without losing the important context. The one thing that I noticed in a couple of your answers is statements like, in this case, for example, you mentioned I was given 4 or 5 days time to implement this solution on the back end. So these kind of statements, it make it sound like you were assigned things, right? And that's, yeah, sure, that happens. But what would be more impressive is if you take initiative, so you see an issue, you volunteer, right? So you don't wait to assign, you volunteer. So that said, consider using terminology like, or phrases like, I took on this, right? And within 4 or 5 days timeline, I implemented it, right? Versus sounds like, okay, your manager told you, okay, hey, you're not going to have 2 weeks, you're going to have 4 or 5 days, and you work on this, right? So it's a small tweak, but it makes a big difference in terms of, you taking action and
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
the other thing is, so this example, was good in terms of conflict, but one or couple data points that the conflict resolution type of questions are specifically looking for is how did you negotiate and how did you influence folks, right? So here it was good in terms of your judgment, you were the right and so on, right? But it didn't necessarily have a data point on how did you influence them and negotiate, right? Because, in the end, the PM just went ahead and did what, they wanted to do, right? So you want to consider maybe adding, if you have any other data points to kind of protect yourself, so that demonstrates, okay, that you did all the right things in terms of negotiating and so on, right? So in your main answer, add a little bit more about how did you, present in that initial discussion, right? Because the first time when you mention it, it sounded like, okay, you just raised a hand and said, okay, well, no, this, isn't the best approach. And then she went ahead and did it, right? But later on in one of the follow-up question, you mentioned, okay, well, in that initial discussion, you talked about the CAPTCHA solution, right? And so, right? So elaborate that more, because that is a critical part that it should be a critical part of action portion of your main answer, right? So there, talk about that influencing. So, that initial discussion, you highlighted the risk, right? You came up with the alternate solution, the CAPTCHA, and so on. You proposed the fastest possible timeline, which was 4 to 5 days. Sounds reasonable. You did all the right things. So if you want to make a demonstrate that if you weren't able to influence them, but that at least you did all the right things, but then it was on them, kind of thing, right? Okay, like pointing a finger.
Perfect.
The other thing is, when we talked about learnings, I asked learnings because, it wasn't necessarily learnings on your side, but I expected learnings on their side. And here I was curious about, or I was hoping to hear about learnings around some sort of post-mortem, right? Where how did you help product understand learnings or this particular PM and make sure that, they don't do such such decisions in the future. So maybe there was some sort of post-mortem process, or maybe there was something else, that you could add if it happened, right? Now, I understand it's a smaller company, things move very fast, but at the same time, a decision like this can cut a lot of traffic, right? And it can make a big impact, right? The other thing is, I like how you talked about in learnings, how this caption solution, then you helped another team adopt it and so on. A little bit more about that, because that's a, good, capture is a good practice, best practice for these kind of things, right? Reduce bot traffic on whatever features on a website, right? So then maybe talk a little bit more about, so in a short sentence, you did mention how you document in a Confluence page and then another team picked it up. Okay, that's good. But then you can make it more impressive by just expanding that a little bit, right? So you clearly documented, how you did it. So it basically made a self-service for other teams. You also presented this and proposed it to the teams that you knew have front-end customer-facing features that are at risk of bot traffic. So then it sounds like, it's less, it doesn't sound like, okay, well, this other team decided to use it, but you brought it up to them and you highlighted, hey, this is the best practice they should use. Here's how to do it. I'm available. I can guide you. I can mentor you and so on, right? That sounds more impressive, because then you're influencing other team, and you, along the way, in addition to providing documentation, you also potentially consulting and guiding the engineer on their side. And that helps interview understand your scope, not just within your team, but also, beyond your team as well.
Got it. Small tweaks, I can see. Yeah. Excellent though. Yep. Thank you.
Great. But yeah, overall was good. It was just, like you mentioned, small tweaks. Any clarification questions on this one?
Not on this one in particular. Yeah.
Okay. The last question we covered was the talk about the largest project, or the project that you most proud of that you delivered. So the project that you talked about, it was good on bias for action and, doing something quickly and so on. But for this kind of question, when somebody's asking you the most complex project or something you're most proud of and so on, think about maybe considering something that was way more complex project, in terms of technical complexity and bigger, and that demonstrates your ability to lead a project with multiple engineers. Because one thing that separates at Amazon, that separates, mediocre L5 engineers with, from bar raising L5 engineers is bar raising L5 engineers, they can take complex projects, break it down into smaller tasks, design it, set up, technical vision, pick up the most complex implementation details, and delegate the others to the other engineers, guide them along the way, right? So if you have experience delivering such projects, for this kind of question, I would pick something like that, because it has more impressive details. Versus here, this one is, again, it's good on ability to do it quickly, to, pick up best practice, right? And then something, scaled across other teams. That's great, right? But consider, something like that it has more data points around you delegating and so on. Now, something like this, it could potentially fit in a criteria if you actively worked with the other teams and helped other teams pick up this and so on, right? So in that case, if you do go with this example, then add a little bit more weight on how you worked with other teams to adopt this. Maybe, that adoption wasn't always smooth because there's a lot of, specific use cases. So maybe you help them navigate those things and so on, right? So if that's the case, okay, great. Then you could potentially use this one. The other thing is, let's see, similar comment like what, if you remember in the previous question, you used the statement something like, okay, I was assigned task or something like that, right? Here, you also mentioned the task that was given to me was to find a standardized way. And that's not as impressive as you detecting that, hey, this is a problem, this is a need, right? And then you proposing it to your manager and leadership, hey, this is really painful. It makes our operational overhead complex. I'm gonna, you raise your hand, you volunteered, and you found a way, So the part of the, solving something like this, the first step is recognizing that this is a problem and it's worth ROI, it's worth investing and prioritizing, right? And then, the second thing is, okay, figure out who's gonna do it. And then the third thing is actually doing it, right? So if you look at it that way, you only did the third thing. It would be better if you did the first two as well. So if you play the role, I mean, obviously you don't want to lie in the interview, but you do want to highlight and give yourself credit. So for example, even if you played a role in identifying this, maybe it wasn't, you that actually identified it, worked with the other teams to help quantify how big of a pain is this across the company. But if you did work with leadership and had some inputs to it, then definitely highlight it.
So basically what you're saying is, instead of me being assigned the task, I should say more like, I proactively picked it up myself, right? Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because the way interviewers or especially hiring managers look at it, well, any L5 SD can be assigned task, right? And if I assign this any good L5 SD at Amazon, yeah, they should be able to figure it out, right? But not any good L5 SD at Amazon is going to proactively look at it. Okay, wow, this is paying for my team. Work with other teams and kind of figure out, okay, wow, this is also paying across the board. Quantified, you don't need to necessarily have solid numbers like, okay, this many hours, across 10 teams are being spent on this, and it's like improve it, right? But at least get an idea of what is the overall opportunity, and then proactively kind of take action, or maybe talk to your manager, hey, this is a problem, right? Give me some time, right? And then you come up with a solution.
Okay.
The other thing, this one is more of a nitpick, so kind of more optional. In the result section of your answer, you talked about impact, which is good, but consider quantifying a little bit more if you have any numbers around it. So for example, how much time overall did it save on average across the company? Log size, I'm assuming, I don't know if a log size is decreased or if things are more simplified now. You mentioned troubleshooting is faster. Okay, great. By how much? So that means probably time to close tickets probably went down, right? So, and that's core metric, right? Solving customer issues or a metric. So, okay, that SLA, how did it impact, ticket SLA and so on?
Right. So basically, pager duty has something called time to resolve, right? So that actually came down.
Yeah,
We could
that's
see
that.
that. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's important one. Yeah.
Yep. I will add that. Yep. Absolutely.
The other thing is in your main answer, well, there's a couple things that will bubble up in the main answer. So you mentioned, okay, the entire company took it up and adopted it. Great. I mean, add that to your main answer. The other thing that you should also talk a little bit more about in the action part of your main answer is how you influenced, right? Because here you had to influence, I think you mentioned head of platform or something like that. Okay, great. How did you do it? Did you keep in mind that Amazon is kind of doc heavy environment, meaning for decisions like this, typically there will be some sort of written proposal, required usually to drive those meetings and help influence folks. And there, you would highlight, okay, what is the challenge? What is your proposed solution or recommendation? What are the alternatives? Why is yours better than the others? And so on, right? So if you did any of that when you negotiated with the head of platform, mention it. Another thing that typically would be expected or at Amazon is, okay, you will have some sort of draft proposal. You probably, before going directly to head of platform, you might review it your manager or with your team, right? Now that can kind of review it on a couple levels, right? So you can't debate, that as well.
Okay.
Let's see, a couple other things, or sorry, the very last one is, well, actually, never mind. We already talked about it. The bigger project, delegation, mentoring others along the way. This one, it wasn't necessarily ideal because the way you covered it was, okay, one-man show for about a week, right? And then others took it on. So again, if you do use this example, then at least highlight the other part, how you worked with other teams, how you were basically the SME and the main point of contact to guide their engineers along the way of the adoption.
Okay. I see. Yeah.
Any clarification questions on this one?
No clarification question. I just have one general question.
Okay.
So let's say, so on Amazon, right, I'm going to have 4 on-site, right? So, and in each of the on-sites from my previous experience from 2021-22, they usually ask in around 2 behavioral questions, right? So that's like 8 questions. So, and I have maybe 9 stories in total. So at least, let's say for a couple of those questions, the stories might be the exact same. Is that okay? I mean, I may use things.
Yeah. Good question. So it's okay to use the same example, but as a best practice, when you are using it for the second time, just to let the interviewer know, hey, by the way, the example that's coming to mind is something I already talked to so-and-so about, is it okay if I, use the same example? Typically, they're going to say yes. And also another reason why, you can use it is because even though you're using the same example, you're gonna be covering it from a different angle, right? It says with the same example for two different questions, you're gonna add more weight and talk about, different aspects of the example. So that's fine. You don't want to necessarily use it like 3 times, because then it's raised a question on continuity, right? And do you just have one impressive thing that you did and then you kind of over it, or do you have kind of good portfolio of things? Yeah. Now, and you're right. Typically, depends on the interview a little bit, about 8 to 10 behavior or leadership, questions around Amazon leadership principles. And it's good to kind of get yourself familiar with, okay, what are some of those most common leadership principles? Sample questions, what kind of questions, and that's going to help you map those impressive examples that you want to talk about. That's going to kind of help you map, okay, to which leadership principle or not necessarily which principle, what kind of questions that you want to use them for. The reason why I say don't map them necessarily to leadership principles is because sometimes it's not clear if see question, it's not clear what leadership principle it's related to. And you don't want to add an additional mental overload on your side to kind of try to map it and then figure out the answer. But instead, just focus on what the question is and find the best, example for that. Because sometimes, even for Amazon folks, it's not, sometimes the specific questions are on a bubble of couple leadership principles, so yeah, can go different ways.
Okay. So for an L5, especially for an SDE role, I have heard that there are like these 9 LPs which are the most important. Could you confirm if it's only these 9, or can it go beyond this list? Just like,
Yeah, I can give you a list right now, a typical list. So one is earn trust. This one is, by the way, they're not by priority. So yeah. Typically earn trust, deliver results for sure will be covered. Ownership, very likely, or for sure covered. Bias for action is another important one. Think big should be covered. Customer obsession should be covered. Now, this one is optional. Hire and develop the best. That one is rarely covered, but if it is covered, it's more covered from a perspective of how you mentor folks, right? So there could be a question like, hey, tell me about that time you mentor somebody or made somebody better, or how do you, mentor more junior engineers, how you involved in or helping your company hire good talent and so on. But again, those are, not always covered. And then insist on higher standards. That one is covered. Are right a lot. That one is optional. For L5 SDE, that might be optional. Another one that's typically covered is have backbone, disagree, and commit. And that one actually is important, right? Because it'll be a question around making sure that you're comfortable raising your hand and pushing back against decision that you feel is not right. That's first part, have backbone. Now, there's a second part, which is disagree and commit, which means once, say group decision is made, and even though you initially disagree with that decision, how did you disagree and commit? And meaning, how did you, if the group decided to go with that, how did you then support it, right? So, okay, there was initial discussion, you pushed back, right? But overall collective decision was to still go forward with it. Okay, then how did you support it, right? So that disagree and commit is important. Another one is, a couple are invent and simplify. This one is depends. Sometimes is covered, sometimes not. And the last one is learn and be curious. Also, kind of depends. It's could or could not be covered depending on the actual loop. Now, keep in mind, there's also going to be other things like dive deep and dealing with ambiguity, but those are typically covered as part of the questions. It is not necessarily going to be specific questions on that, but
okay.
For example, dealing with ambiguity would be typically covered as part of system design.
Yes.
So you given required, but generally for system design and for some coding questions as well, things are left ambiguous by design, right? So it's expected that you kind of ask the right questions, probe into it, and so on.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Does that help, or any clarification questions about any of these?
Nope. I just have a few points, to work on. That's all.
Okay. But yeah, thanks. Overall, yeah, again, there was a lot of great stuff there. In my interviews, these kind of mock interviews, I tend to be a little bit more picky. And so it doesn't necessarily mean you need to address all these things, right? But even if you address 20, 30%, that's great, huge, But I try to be a little bit more picky, because that means, okay, if you address it, then for sure it's pass and bar raising in whatever interview, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean if you don't address, a bunch of these that it would be necessarily a red flag, So
Okay.
It also depends on an interviewer.
All right. So, like, typically, what times would you be free, and so that maybe I can schedule a few more interviews with you? That would include systems design and also, maybe, DSA questions.
Yeah, so I'm available. So IK has my availability, but any mornings are like this, 10 o'clock actually works great. And then typically weekends, and then after 6 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m. Pacific time. But anyway, it kind of depends on the day because I actually quit Amazon last year, so I'm working part time, so I have a lot of flexibility in projects I'm working on and so on, right? And IK has that availability. So I would just go based on what's available for you and so on. Now, as far as system design, DSA, unfortunately, I don't typically cover those through IK because the reason why is the way my contract is with IK, I focus more on the type of behavioral interviews that not necessarily all folks can do. System design, it's something that a lot of there's a lot of other interviewers that can do it through IK, and the reason why is because you don't need to be senior manager or director covering system design. Anybody from, let's say strong senior SDE at Amazon that has experience interviewing candidates through, and asking system design type of point, this is great. There will be great resource for that. Same thing, right? So, say strong L5 SD at Amazon or L6 SD at Amazon that's been involved in interviewing process, especially covering coding competencies, data structures, and algorithms. They'll be great resource as well, right? So, and there's a lot more of those kind of folks available through IK platform. So, for that, you can, what would be good, I mean, you can either book time directly through it's called up level system or something like that. But another thing you can do is you can drop email to IK Ops.
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Ask specifically, hey, I would like to have, say, DSA with L6 or above SDE at Amazon. That has a lot of experience doing interviews, right? Yeah. Or some, maybe if not from Amazon, if don't have anybody, there's somebody from Faang company that, cool.
All right. Cool.
It helps.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Very nice to meet you. I'll send you written notes. As you go through it, if you have any additional follow-up questions, feel free to reach out. I'll send you email once I have notes ready, so you'll have my email, my private email.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Very nice to meet you. Have a good rest of the week. Bye-bye.